Greetings everyone, this is Darth Eshba'al, and today we're going to do another sermon from the Path of Power written by the Dark Lords. That would be Darth Imperius and Darth Ravenous. So I've been going through this book a lot, and I've been choosing the pages in which I want to read. If you do have this book, and you do want to follow along, today we are going to discuss the 9 Pillars of Sithism, and it starts on page 79. Now, as per usual, I am going to read this, and then I'm going to go back through, and I am going to basically give my thoughts on these passages, what I agree with and what I don't agree with, because there are some things in which I don't exactly agree with, but at the same time, there are some things in which I do agree with, however, I might view them a little bit differently. So we're going to discuss that. But starting on page 79, it begins the chapter about the Sith Ideology, and it begins with the 9 Pillars of Sithism. And it says, Sithism is the dark side philosophy and path of power followed by the Sith. Below are the 9 pillars of this philosophy. The first one begins with the primacy of power. And it says, what is good? All that heightens the feeling of power, the will to power, power itself in man. What is bad? All that proceeds from weakness. What is happiness? The feeling that power increases, that a resistance is overcome. This is the diamond rule of Sithism. The second one is the Tao of Darwin. Darwinian evolution is the central fact of life on this planet, from the simplest microbes to the most complex intelligent life forms. From genes to memes, nations to corporations, everything in nature exists in a perpetual struggle for dominance. This struggle is the source of all progress, all empowerment, all evolution. The Sith therefore embraced Darwinism as a moral imperative. The third one being the Force. The Sith believe that all life is charged with a vital energy called the Force, similar to Chi, Ki, Shakti, and Mana in other traditions. Cultivating the Force is the key to increasing one's personal power and attaining Sith mastery. The next one is the power of the dark side. Man needs what is most evil in him for what is best in him. To maximize his power, man must learn to embrace his mind shadow and awaken all aspects of his nature. Man's dark side can be his most potent ally, but only if it is brought under control with Sith discipline. And then after that we have the Sith Supermen. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over the abyss. The Sith are in process of giving birth to a new species of Supermen, a conquering race that combines the ferocious spirit of the strongest beasts with the intellect and spirit of the highest men. After that we have the Temple Network. The power of the Sith Order is concentrated in our temples, where the Dark Lords conduct their training and empowerment rituals. Anyone wishing to become a Dark Lord will be required to construct their own Sith temple and add its power to our network. After that comes the Dark Tongue. Borgal, the Black Tongue, is the liturgical and magical language of the Dark Lords that allows them to bend the Force and shape the world according to their wills. To become a Dark Lord, all Sith Academy students are required to learn Borgal. Multiversalism. Sith mystics believe that everything imaginable exists in a larger multiverse of mind. Therefore, the Sith of the galaxy far, far away are real, but exist in another universe, accessible only through the third eye. The basis of this belief was the inter-universal transmission of knowledge from Darth Omega to our Order's founder, Darth Imperius. And the final pillar is the Galactic Empire. For the Sith, the cosmos is a call to greatness and a place to acquire unlimited power. The primary exoteric goal of the Sith is to drive civilization towards ever higher levels of organization and power, to establish global, solar, and galactic empires under the dark side rule. And thus we have the 9 Pillars of Sithism. So then let's go into detail about this real quick. The primacy of power is actually the main point of Sith ideology, in that anything that brings one betterment and self-empowerment is what is considered good. Anything that causes weakness is bad. Much like the Jedi fear emotion, because it then leads to the dark side, so Sith do not so much fear it, but they resent any form of weakness. A Sith is free to feel emotion, a Sith is free to love. A Sith is free to do anything that a Sith wishes to do, so long as it actually does not bring about weakness. if you love someone, but you love someone to the point where you basically bow down to them and allow them to abuse you, then you are allowing weakness, and therefore that love is considered bad. However, if you have a relationship in where the love actually makes you stronger, makes you better yourself, and makes you press forward on your quest to self-empowerment, to enlightenment, to endarkenment, whatever your end goal may be, if this love makes you want to better yourself as a person, to rise above the rest, then that is what's considered good. It's honestly as simple as that. It's not a very complicated concept. So that is what Sith considered good, that's what Sith consider bad. That's why there are indeed evil Sith, but there are also Sith that are not considered evil, as they do follow the rules of nature. And the rules of nature and the rules of the land we will go into in another video, because that is something that has been addressed before, or has been questioned, and I would like to eventually address it as to why Sith actually follow the laws and why they actually follow rules, which people think is blasphemous, but there is actually a very good reason for that. Now, the Tao of Darwin is another Sith principle, and it is actually indeed part of the Sith ideology as a whole. Sithism, much like Jedi realism, is a multifaceted religion in that there are many, or lifestyle even, because it's not always a religion, but it's multifaceted in the fact that a lot of people follow this. They follow Sithism, they follow Jedi realism, Force realism in general. However, the way in which they believe that it works is completely different. Much like the different facets of Christianity, from baptism to Catholicism to agnostic to evangelical, they're all Christian. However, they do follow specific beliefs that separate them from another part of Christianity, even though the founding religion is indeed the same. Sithism is the same way. There are many different people that follow Sithism that believe that it follows a different path than what most will agree that it does. However, the first one being what is considered good and what's considered bad in Sithism, that is the foundation of what all Sithism is based in. It doesn't matter what kind of Sithism you follow. The premise that anything good is what brings you power and anything bad is what brings you weakness is something that all Sith will actually agree on. And the Tao of Darwin, Darwinism in general, is another thing in which all Sith will actually agree upon. That we are a species that is meant to evolve, that can change, that survival of the fittest actually exists, and that it is a part of us. And as Sith, we do play a part in trying to be better so that we can actually evolve. Humanity thus far seems to be regressing. Technology is advancing, but as technology advances and the luxuries of technology make it so that humans do not have to do as much, and thus we can focus on more petty problems in the world. Humanity is actually degressing. They are not evolving. There are species that are becoming stronger than us. There are species that are starting to become smarter than us. And because of this, the Sith are trying to reverse this, at least for their own kind. Sith are human, yes, but in a sense, we consider ourselves a different type of human, in that we are looking to better ourselves, to evolve, to become something different. And as this basically says, we are struggling for a type of dominance. We are looking to make progress. We are looking to empower ourselves. And thus we do believe in evolution, and that if we are regressing, then we are failing as Sith. However, if we are gaining knowledge, if we are training our bodies, if we are learning survivalism, so that we can overcome any situation, we are in fact following Darwinism. We are in fact following the survival of the fittest, and we as Sith are like phoenixes that will rise from the ashes, because we have evolved and we have bettered ourselves in this way. The Force is another thing that I do agree with this book. Sith see the Force as an actual force. We see the Force as an energy. It is the well of life. It is an energy that runs through all things. And we do see it as more of something that can be harnessed as a power, such as Chi, and such as Ki, and Shakti, and Mana. That is something that Sith actually believe. Now, Jedi actually believe the same thing. However, to them, at least nowadays, the Force is more so than just an energy. The Force is actually looked upon as God. It is looked upon as something that the Jedi pray to, that they actually worship. Whereas Sith do not so much worship the Force, but we appreciate the Force. We acknowledge its existence, and we look to harness its power through meditation. There are times in which a Sith will ask the Force for guidance, but most of the time we're not asking the Force itself. We are asking the Force to flow through us so that we may find our own answers in our own space, in our own meditational void. The answers do not come from an outside source. It is merely the Force which powers us to send our question out there so that something may answer in return. And it is not worshipped as a god, though it is essential in any Force study, whether it be Jedi realism or Sithism, and the Sith acknowledge that without the Force, we are indeed nothing. The power of the dark side is another thing that I agree with, and it is basically, as they said, that a man needs to understand what is evil in him in order to become the best he can be. But the way I interpret this is that man must fall in order to rise. There is no such thing as a perfect being, and there will never be such a perfect being in our lifetime or even after. Even when Sith have reached the point of almost being a god, we are still bound by our mortality to indeed make mistakes, and even in immortality to still make mistakes. Such is our nature. However, a man, because he is not perfect, must fall, and it is usually the fall which then teaches us a lesson so that we can move forward. One must make a mistake in order to remedy it. It's one of those things where they say, if we do not learn from the past, history is bound to repeat itself. And the Sith follow this, which is why we do make mistakes. And then as long as we take that as an experience and we learn from it, then we will continue moving forward and we are better than what we were before. We must see what we are weak to and what is weakness in us in order to become better, in order to overcome said weakness. And the power of the dark side is alluring, but it is dangerous, and many a Sith that take this path do indeed fall. And when they fall, if they stand back up, then they are on the path to becoming a great Sith Lord. However, if they allow themselves to stay down, then they are not meant for this path, and they will, in the end, not rise from the ashes, but suffocate under them. The power of the dark side is one of the things that once you get a taste of it, you only want more. It's a craving, it's an addiction, and it's how you handle it which will then determine where you end up. So the power of the dark side, while it could have been worded better, there is a message in there. However, I do feel as though this passage in particular is actually very confusing for those reading it, and it's best meant for self-interpretation. The Sith Superman, I feel, is a reiteration of the Tao of Darwin. It is about Darwinism. Sith Superman will come about after many, many centuries of evolution. It will happen when the Sith indeed do rise from the ashes and become a brand new species all their own because they have surpassed humanity in that they were able to survive. While the rest of humanity dies out or is basically whittled down to near nothing and remains in its weakened state for all eternity, the Sith will indeed have become something greater because they have strived to be better. They have found enlightenment. They have found endarkenment. They have become empowered through their efforts and their training. So, while Sith Superman is indeed a pillar that we wish to eventually reach, it is also a part of the Tao of Darwin. It is still a part of Darwinism. It is part of that survival of the fittest and evolution, and it is a point that we wish to eventually get to. So why it's its own separate pillar? Well, I guess in a sense it is something that is a little bit different to where it needs to be addressed on its own. However, please keep a note that that does go along with the Darwinism. That is an actual part of Sith philosophy, is that we will survive to the point that we are surviving as our own separate species. Sith will be their own thing. Just as they were in the Star Wars universe, the Sith are meant to be their own species, their own creature. The temple network is actually essential, much like Christians have their churches and pagans have their altars and their covens in which they go to or which they congregate as, so too Sith need a temple. And it's not just a temple of worship, but as it says, it's a temple of training. It is to train acolytes. It is to train those that are attuned to the dark side and wish to actually join our ranks. Unfortunately, without a temple to train, people are left to read books and to do their own training. And because Sithism is so spread out in its belief, much like any other religion, it is multifaceted, to the point where it is almost impossible to find a steady training routine. Sithism right now, as is, without the temple network, is just a bunch of people reading books, looking up self-training so that they can somehow become more attuned to the dark side, so that they can begin following what they believe to be the true dark side path. But of course, because of this, we are not meeting in the middle. We are not coming together as a single people, which is what we need. So, it does indeed make sense that anybody becoming a Dark Lord, or who is a Dark Lord, needs to eventually start their own temple, which is why these YouTube videos exist, which is why Sith Academy did indeed build their own altar that people will eventually be able to make a pilgrimage to, which is why they are indeed building their own temple, because it starts with a single stone. Now, I do encourage people that have indeed done dark side training to eventually build their own temple. If I have the resources, that is something that I eventually intend to do. However, right now I am limited to taking online apprentices and teaching them this way, and also teaching them via YouTube because I do not have the resources in order to build a temple. So it is very, very essential that if we are to become the Sith Superman, if we are to evolve, if we are to create this as a single path that is well known, that is actually an option for the people that wish to survive, that wish to rise as phoenixes and become a god, in a sense, then we do need the temple network. So this is something that I, again, agree with, and it is something that indeed makes sense, unlike the power of the dark side, which is not very well clarified. Another thing that I don't find necessary, in a sense, is the Black Tongue. The Black Tongue, of course, is actually very powerful in that there is power in words. Many a pagan had their own language and actually had their own way of praying via a type of tongue that was unique just to them. There have been many languages that were used for the sake of rituals and magics, and Sithism nowadays is much more attuned to dark magic than it was in the past. In the past, it was more of a physical aspect and an ideology, as in it was just a way of thinking. It was more of a lifestyle. However, now it has become more ritualistic, in which Borgal has its uses. The Black Tongue indeed has its uses. However, I don't find it necessary to be a pillar of Sithism. I do not find the Black Tongue to be necessary in order to be a Sith. However, to distinguish Sith Academy Siths from the other Siths out there, I do feel that it is actually very, it is very essential in separating the many different Sith out there from those that are actually a part of something as to those that are separate. So, the Black Tongue has its uses. I feel like it's more of a clan stamp or a guild stamp of sorts, to associate this Sith with this temple. And I can actually see it becoming a more universal thing. However, right now, it is something that is, I'd say it's very hard to learn, because resources are indeed limited, or at least from what I've seen, resources are very limited, and getting used to things and getting used to the way they're said and using it on a daily basis, because the network of Sith Academy is so separated and is so small, that learning the Black Tongue minus a few phrases here and there is near impossible, and therefore cannot be established as a pure pillar of Sithism just yet, because it's not an established enough language that is readily available for everyone. The multiversalism is something that I do actually agree with. It is the multiverse theory, and the multiverse theory is that there are many things out there happening all at the same time in different universes that don't exist in our universe. Such as, in this universe I am alive and well and talking on YouTube. However, there is a universe where I'm already dead. There is a universe where I died today. There's a universe where I died 2 years ago. There's a universe where I actually died in Germany. which was a rumor for a while, and I don't know why, however, it was there. There's a universe where I never become a Sith. There is a universe where I go about becoming a Jedi Knight and never consider Sithism. There is a universe where, indeed, I never joined Sith Academy because it was something I stayed away from like the plague. There's a universe for everything, and therefore it is actually quite possible that there is a universe in which Sith actually exist already. There is such a thing that far, far away actually does indeed exist, and that Sith are real, as are Jedi. Lightsabers are a thing, and Force powers are indeed a thing. Shooting lightning from your fingertips is indeed a thing in one of these universes. So the multiverse theory is something that I actually do believe in. However, communicating between the multiverses is something that's a little bit harder for most to believe. I personally can believe it, and would believe that it is something that can happen under certain circumstances, because if there's a universe where we cannot even begin to comprehend that there are multiple universes, so too there's a universe where someone has learned the trick to communicating with other universes. So that is actually quite possible. However, this is something that not everyone believes. It is something that not all people need as to reaffirm their belief in Sithism, thus it is not something that needs to be established as a pillar of Sithism. However, for the sake of Sith Academy, it has been. And finally, we have the Galactic Empire. And yes, another thing that a lot of Siths believe in is a galactic empire, but they believe in it as something that maybe once existed, or maybe something that could exist in the future. And Sith Academy takes it to the next level, as in making it a goal. As in, that is the end goal. That is the topping. That is the icing to the cake. That is the cherry on top of the sundae, is that we were meant to rule. We were meant to become the Supermen, to evolve into something more than human, to evolve into something close to God, and that we were able to take control. That the universe is ours for the taking, and slowly but surely we will do that, because we will have attained such power that we can do so. So I do believe that the Galactic Empire idea is actually a necessary pillar in Sithism, in that we need an end goal. We need something to work towards, and this is something that we can easily work towards. So, but there's not all Sith believe in the Galactic Empire. Not all Sith believe that we need one. Most take Sithism as a simple religion, and they don't take it as anything else. And some people just take it as a lifestyle. Some people don't need it at all. However, they would say that if they were to choose, they would be a Sith. And a lot of people, just their realistic idea of reality alone makes them Sith, and they don't even know it. But that's just the beginning of this journey, which is Sithism. So that has been the 9 Pillars of Sithism, and of course I will continue with sermons as time goes on. There is a new hardback book supposedly coming out with updates and upgrades to it, in which I would like to see. I would like to do more sermons in the future, because there are some things in the book that I would like to address. There are some things that I do actually believe in that they follow Sithism, and there are some things in there that I do not think are necessary. However, I do still feel like they need to be addressed for those that are curious. I've had a lot of people talking to me about where else they can learn about Sithism versus Sith Academy. Sith Academy right now is actually the largest in teaching one about Sithism. However, there are other organizations out there that are still running. However, they are more inactive, and they are more about discussions and creating your own Sith path. Order of the Sith is another website in which I have become a part of I became a part of a long time ago. They do have a training regimen on there, however, it is very short, and it is more about questioning oneself and making an effort to train your mind. But again, it is very short. It's more acolyte level stuff. It seems to be more tedious than anything, and the whole purpose of it was to go before a council after completing this training and saying that you are ready to be an actual Sith Lord. And of course, this would then put you into the trials, and I don't know what their trials are, as it is given, it is a unique experience to each person, and it is unique trials to each person. However, after doing the training, you are allowed to take the trials. After taking the trials, that was supposed to earn you your Darth title. I earned my Darth title a long time ago, and through Sith Academy, I went from Acolyte all the way up to Lord before I eventually took the Darth title for myself upon leaving the Sith Academy and doing my own independent studies. So, There are Sith websites out there, but do be careful. As I said, all Sithism websites function differently. Just as any Jedi websites, some are based in Christianity, some are based in paganism, some are based in their own thing entirely. So too is Sithism. This is known as pseudo-Sithism. This is known as I can't say it's known as, but this is pseudo-Sithism. This is Sithism where other things have been plugged in. It is a custom course, a custom path. So, but I will go more into this with other videos as part of a more of a guide, so to say. But that's not something that's going to come in the immediate future, as this is something that I want to lay out a little bit more perfectly before addressing it. Anyways, that's all I have for this video. I will be doing more sermons I will also be hosting more discussions and more lectures in the future. If you are interested in anything that I have had to say, feel free to leave me a comment down below, and I will gladly engage in conversation with you about it. But until the next time, may the darkness be with you. Always.